We closed yesterday on the Gemara in Pesahim, where Rabbi Yehuda argues that burning hametz is like burning leftover sacrifices. And we're going to carry on with this interrelationship between the burning of hametz and the burning of sacrifices as we close off the first chapter. And in fact, we'll see some connections at the beginning of the second chapter as well. So we start with Rabbi Chanina Skan HaKohanim, the deputy head of the priests. Rabbi Chanina Skan HaKohanim Omer, Mimehem shel Kohanim lo nimneu milisrof et habasar shenitma bilvad hatuma im habasar shenitma ba'av hatuma. Af al pi shemosifim tuma al tumato. The Rabbi Chanina, the deputy head of the Kohanim, said that forever, mimehem, during all the days of the priests, they never worried about burning meat which had been defiled by a second order uncleanness, together with meat which had been defiled by a first order uncleanness. So a first order uncleanness is something like well, we talked about it a couple of days ago, a dead sheretz, a dead creepy crawly. That provides, if that's first order uncleanness, and if the dead sheretz touches, for example, a person, I think the person then becomes a second order uncleanness. And if he touches a piece of meat rather than the dead sheretz touching the piece of meat, these two pieces of meat have got different levels of tumah. And Rabbi Chanina is saying it's okay. We have a mixture, but we can burn them both together. Even though we're going to increase the uncleanness, he says we're going to add to the uncleanness. That's an important word. Afal pishe mosifim tuma al tumato. We're going to add one uncleanness to the other, i.e. we're going to add the uncleanness of the first order tuma to the second, that of the second order tuma. And Rabbi Akiva seems to be stimulated by this idea of adding tumah to tumah, because he's now going to add something onto the Mishnah. We said ki afalpi shemosifin tumah al tumato, and now we have hosif Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva adds ve'amar, and he says. And his saying is a mirror image of the saying we've just had. Mimehem shel kohanim, exactly the same language. Lo nimnu, that during the days of the priests, they never refrained. But then a different specific, milhadlik et hashem shenivsal bitfu yom, b'ner she nitma bitmeimet. Afal pi, and it closes the same way, shemosifim tuma al tumato. So Rabbi Akiva added and said, during the days of the priests, they never refrained from lighting oil, which had been made unfit by a tavul yom. Well, what's a tavul yom? Now, if a priest came into contact with a dead person, and we read about this actually in the Parsha of Chukat, just 6 days. Yeah, it was just 6 days ago. It was Shabbat Parah. So the priest comes in contact with something dead. We will sprinkle on him on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, and then in the evening he bathes. And then in the evening, where after sun has set, he is pure again. So it takes 3 things. He needs the sprinkle, he needs to bathe, and he needs time. A tavul yom is someone who's bathed, but time hasn't passed. In other words, it's not dark yet. So he's not clean yet. And so if he touches this oil, this becomes unfit, nifsal, because of his touch. But that is a different order of tumah from a light, a lamp, which has actually been defiled by someone who's really contracted corpse impurity. B'ner shenitma bitmei met. And if we pour that oil into that lamp, then the oil becomes, I guess you could say, more tameh. And that's really how Rabbi Akiva closes. Afal pi shemosifin tuma al tumato. Even though doing so adds uncleanness to uncleanness. In other words, Rabbi Akiva said, and he agrees, by the way, with Rabbi Hanina, the deputy head of the Kohanim, that there was never any hesitation about burning these things together. But the question then is, look, can we burn? How does that apply to burning hametz? So Rabbi Meir is going to say, midivrehem, from their words, lamadnu shesorfin truma tura im hatamea b'Pesach. If we've got clean truma that we have to burn, maybe it's hametz. Truma, which is hametz, has to be burnt. And maybe, of course, the truma was already not, of course, the truma might have been tameh anyway. Anything can happen to truma. It can come into contact with the sheretz. So Rabbi Meir says, midivrehem lamadnu shesorfen truma Torah im hatmeah b'Pesach. When we do the burning, right? Remember, this is all about the burning on the 6th hour. We can burn clean truma together with unclean, even though by doing that, we're actually going to render the clean truma unclean. So, okay, we're going to burn it anyway, right? So it's no good to us, I guess. But, you know, that you could say, look, there's a final indignity in making it even more unclean while we're burning it. And Rabbi Yossi objects. Amar Rabbi Yossi, einahi hamidah. That's not an analogy. Umodim Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Hoshua sorfin zol atzma v'zol atzma. And I think Rabbi Meir is saying it's not an analogy because here we're talking about clean and unclean truma, whereas Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Hanina, the deputy head of the Kohanim, are talking about two objects which are both tameh already in different ways. They're not talking about tahor and tameh. They're talking about tameh and tameh, but in different degrees. And that's why, I mean, Rabbi Meir may want to argue from that, but Rabbi Yossi says you can't argue from tahor and tameh to tameh and tameh, from tameh and tameh to tahor and tameh. And Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Hoshua agree. So when we have these three sages agree, we know effectively the halacha is going to go according to them. Amar le Rabbi Yossi einahi amida umodim Rabbi Eliezer ve Rabbi Hoshua shesorfin zo la'atzma v'zo la'atzma. We burn each one on its own. So, are Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Hoshua entirely in agreement? Al ma nechelku, what do they disagree about? Al tluya ve'al tameh, in respect of the doubtful and the unclean. So let's say we've got something which we know is unclean and something which might be unclean. Shi Rabbi Eliezer omer tisaref zolatzma velo zolatzma. Rabbi Eliezer says, look, each will be burnt separately. And we know, by the way, Rabbi Eliezer, first, he's very particular to the point of being extreme. But he's particularly particular about, if you like, separation. Rabbi Eliezer is particularly concerned about keeping stuff clean. Remember, Rabbi Eliezer is the Bor Sid. What his teaching is compared to a plastered cistern, right? Nothing can get in. He won't teach anything that he hasn't learned from his own teacher. Yeah, he doesn't take any, Rabbi Eliezer doesn't take any risks with impurity. He doesn't like stuff that is whole, if you like, getting into the mix. So we're not surprised that Rabbi Eliezer says they have to be burnt separately. The Rabbi Yoshua, and Rabbi Yoshua is a blacksmith, right? And he's more practical. He's used to living in the real world. Rabbi Yoshua Omer, Shtehen Ke'echat. We can burn them both together. And that's the closure of the first chapter. Can we burn? We're closing on burning, and we're closing on, if you like, burning mixtures. And then as we open the second chapter, we're going to keep our eye on this concept of burning, but we're going to refer back to our discussion about times, which we touched on right in the middle of the at the beginning of the chapter. Remember, we had a discussion about how long we can eat hametz for and when we have to burn it. And we're going to come back to that discussion. Maybe we can eat it until the end of the 4th hour. Maybe we can eat it until the end of the 5th hour. The sages disagree. We certainly have to start burning it at the beginning of the 6th hour. And the Mishnah says, Kol she'ashe mutar le'echol. As long as one's permitted to eat, as long as we can eat it, we can basically enjoy it. We can get benefit from it. So we can feed it to cattle and beasts and birds, and we can sell it to a Gentile, and we can benefit. Any kind of benefit from it is permitted for as long as we can eat it. Avar zman, or when its time has passed, asur bahanato velo yasik bo tanur ve'chiyaraim. And once its time has passed, we can't get any benefit from it. We can't even get benefit from a stove which we fired with it. If we're going to burn it, we're going to just burn it for the sake of burning it. We can't burn it for heat. We can't get any benefit at all from it once its time has passed. And now Rabbi Yehuda is going to come in with the last word. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ein biur hametz eila sreifa. So maybe this is the final, if you like, connection between burning leftover sacrifices and burning hametz. That Rabbi Yehuda says, actually, there's no other way of doing it except for burning. Remember, Rabbi Yehuda was the author of the material in the Talmud that we touched on at the beginning of this lesson and the end of the last one. Rabbi Yehuda sees hametz and leftover sacrifices as absolutely analogous. And the sages are going to disagree, by the way. For Chachamim omrim, af mefared vezoreh laruach umatil layam. The sages are going to say, no, the thing you just got to do is to get rid of it in some way. And they might accept the philosophical concept that chametz is like leftover sacrifices, but in practice, we can get rid of it in any way we like. We can crumble it, or we can throw it to the wind, and we can cast it into the sea.